So last couple of weeks we've been talking about empathy. We talked about nurturing, over-nurturing students. And so this week, the conversation was I was specifically interested in this idea. Some time ago I did this project where I looked at the effect of a certain cultural trend in society on aspects of teaching or aspects of learning. Larry Green just walked in. And so I was curious this time, and I put as a Google Doc just an example of one of these, because I think if you're teaching in DE, you probably notice this. And that is just the general effect of social media. If it's too weird, like you see yourself laughing.
There's a time lag.
There's a lag, yeah, at least 10-15 second lag. So if we think about social media as an example, more and more students, of course, are on social media, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, whatever it happens to be. So a number of us, I think, that teach in DE, on the one hand say, well, it's positive that students are engaged in technology and they're engaged in media. It can have an impact on how we teach because clearly there's certain things you do at a very basic level on social media, like how you interact with your friends, down to the level of how you write, punctuation, lack of punctuation. Leslie Amato just walked in. Welcome. There's also just decorum, right? So if you go on social media, even before sort of the Twitter presidency we have now, people have always, I think, used social media, like Reddit. There are a lot of just even dangerous places online that people use to communicate, not in the best way. So for me, I think I'm always thinking about when I'm teaching DE, how does like social media impact how I'm teaching? Now, what I try to think with all these is there's a positive transformation. So I think clearly because students are interested in media, they're using technology. There's a savvy there that over time, could become a career in computers or a career in marketing or media design, three-dimensional design, whatever that is. So I often think with these, you could translate any of the negative things and like refocus it in some ways such that the students, it turns into a strength. And so I'm thinking about that at the moment with, even teaching 3 face-to-face classes right now where students come in with devices and computers, and I don't know how all of you handle it, but I lose track, and so I don't tell them, you can't have computers or phones. But it is maybe a different distraction than we experienced in the past. And I put a second one up here, which is socioeconomic and life insecurity, everything from food insecurity to housing insecurity. Just yesterday in a couple of my Promise classes, I heard from students saying, I love that you guys have dorms, but even that is pretty expensive for me. So I was thinking for any of these that we come up with, and we might just stay on one for a while, or if you have one, we could talk about that. Just, what's the effect on us? And it doesn't even have to be in teaching. It could be however we run our offices or anything we do on campus. And then can we turn that into a positive thing if it's having a negative impact on us? And if you're watching live, feel free to, on the chat on the right-hand side, ask us a question. We can see your chat screen, even though we're about 15 seconds delay right now. So who wants to start?
I'll start with something that you had added in, I think, a Forbes
yes.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I looked at the 4 or 5 details of trends
mm-hmm.
in education, one of them was mindfulness, the
mm-hmm.
practice of mindfulness and how popular that is. And that is definitely a hot topic, and
mm-hmm.
I've done quite a bit of research in that area in regards to professional development, but I think that would be a good one on a cultural issue, just on how students are reactive to that or not into that at all. That's helpful on their emotional status.
2 ounces or 1?
I think that's right.
Yeah.
No, just 1.
Yeah.
So what would that look like? Because I think what you're getting at is that if you had mindfulness, it could make classroom situations easier, right? Or just any work situation. But if you lack that, then maybe it's something we want our students to gain, or any of us to gain in a professional environment.
I think that they need that. I think our
mm-hmm.
students might need that as an outlet.
Yeah.
When you look at the trends, I think that we should be open to what it is our students need.
Mm-hmm.
And if we have resources that we can offer them, if that's not our teaching style or it doesn't really fit with our subject. But in terms of the social, emotional well-being of our students, I think that that's a cultural issue.
Mm-hmm. I was just, last night we're doing a little section in the Promise classes about dealing with stress and dealing with work-life balance. And one of the things I liked, and I think it was the Mayo Clinic or CDC, because they see work-life balance as a potential health issue, and mindfulness obviously would come in really well in this area, particularly like with meditation or something like that. But one of the things I liked on the list was the value of volunteering. That is one way for students to really capture that emotional and social well-being. And mindfulness there, and preparing students to be good citizens and good community members, I think is something that's incumbent in whatever we teach, because we want our students not just to learn math or anthro or wilderness or early ECE. We want them also to be good people and hopefully do good things in their communities, wherever those communities will be in the future. So I think mindfulness is a great opportunity to think like big picture and even beyond like what we do with our very practical stuff in our classrooms.
To go off that is, I think for wilderness education, that's one of the tangibles of being in the wild is you gain the mindfulness. I went to this one, actually I use it in my class, it's called forest bathing, and it's ways to use your senses to connect to nature. They use it in Japan in all the elementary schools.
Right.
And I thought it was just a great resource. Maybe our college, we have such amazing places out here, just not even for students, but for our faculty and others involved in the college too.
That's something that, just telling our students to go outdoors, there's no excuse. I mean, it could be really super cold or something and icy, but just to be able to go outdoors in Lake Tahoe, right, is a way to de-stress and to become more mindful, for sure.
Nature inspired.
Yeah. That's a great one.
And then the other report, I forget, was the honey, the other download.
Sparks and Honey, the cultural
Sparks
reports,
and Honey. And a lot of the information I got from that was there's just so much information people are taking in through.
Yeah, that's a good one, actually. Information overload.
Information overload.
Yeah, so we were talking last night about just, like having a planner or having apps. Like I have this free Google List app on my phone. And I was telling my students, just keeping up with that, remembering to look at which set of lists. I mean, we get so much information, and I worry sometimes, like even with this Promise program, that are we overloading them with just information? Because it's like, well, how many times do I have to meet with a counselor, and I have to attend an event, and where do I find out about that event? And that's why I think like information design and having an effective way, like the Coyote Corner app to me. And I think Julie said we're going to maybe move that towards having a Promise subbar or something. Having an app or something really organized like that can be very helpful, because I find like for our students, sometimes we're just throwing so much information at them. I have trouble keeping up with some of the requirements just for the Promise program. It's a lot to take in. So, and then you turn on TV, it's a lot of us when we grew up, right, we were used to maybe 3 or 4 channels, and then maybe, cable finally came along. I remember the old days of, a handful of channels, and now there's just like so many options with media, and then it's not just the options, but it's like the timing, like on YouTube, right? Everything is often in these little bits, and so sometimes our students, I think, are living in a world where they have to be more information savvy than we ever had to when we were younger. So that, I think, is a real challenge, and I haven't wrapped my head around that as far as how maybe to work that out through some of the stuff I'm doing in my classes. So it's a really good one.
Yeah, there's some good work coming out of University of Utah and being outdoors and being mindful and the interactions of social media, both positive and negative. And what they're finding, the preliminary findings is that anxiety levels are higher the more we're using social media, right? Because what they're finding is people can't leave it alone. They can't set it aside. They see it as an extension of themselves, right? And the folks that have kind of transitioned from that being an extension of me to this is a tool that I can use, right? To leverage information, to leverage, my socioeconomic well-being, all of this as it being a tool for that. They're finding that anxiety levels are going down, which relates to mindfulness, which relates to resiliency, and that. So I think, at least for me, trying to educate my students on that social media, all the various social media platforms are tools, and we can use tools in the right way or we can use tools in the wrong way. And if we let the tool use us, we become more anxious, we're less mindful, we have less resiliency. So that's just some of the stuff I've been reading and thinking about.
It's really good. I'm thinking, it's almost like we could maybe redirect our students to use certain types of apps. And of course, if we're teaching a math class and there's something useful, we could say, hey, use this, it's really going to help you with math. But I'm thinking of like the anxiety that someone might get from Instagram, from Facebook, particularly young people with eating disorders or bullying. I don't think that would ever happen, like I use All Trails, the app on my phone, if I'm out hiking or something. I can't imagine ever using that app and feeling anxious or feeling like bad about my body or bad about myself. So I think some of these platforms are created, and of course there's a whole critical thing in society right now related to Facebook, and not just political ads, but just, the sense that these companies are becoming monopolies, and they're sort of like taking over. They're transforming now. It's not just images and media, it's currency, it's shopping. And so I'm thinking like maybe we encourage our students to make that simple shift to say, hey, why don't you not use your Facebook account or TikTok, whatever you're using that is probably just there for your entertainment and socializing, and use an app that is related to hiking, or use an app. There are apps that allow you to do conscious consumerism, so you can support companies that have fair labor practices and don't work in sweatshops and maquiladoras and so forth. I'm wondering if that's a possible shift there, because again, you have your phone, you can decide what apps to download, but if you're only focused on those ones that are, I don't want to say narcissistic, but there's a lot on social media right now that really does promote people just looking at themselves and seeing themselves only as something in the eyes of others instead of seeing themselves as something much more than that. So I think you're onto something there with the tool and maybe certain tools that we emphasize students use.
There is one positive social media for online classes especially, that our students, that's the way they communicate.
Yep.
And if they communicate in a positive way through social media with each other, and they're doing group work or whatever conversation, that's great.
Yeah. Yep.
It's not all bad.
Yeah. No, and that's what's so challenging about this, because again, if students are doing like a virtual study session for math or any of our fields that we're teaching, and that's the device they're using or the method they're using, that's perfectly fine. And in fact, there's research coming out now. JD shared something with me that I share with my promise class. We often talk in our age ranges about work-life balance, and they're saying for kids in our classes today, like the 18-year-olds, it's really not about like a distinction. A lot of our students maybe won't end up having an 8-to-5 job, and what you're onto here with social media, that's maybe a part of their world. So you have your laptop, tablet, or phone, and maybe you're doing a little bit of work, and then you go to Facebook, and then it's like this constant flow of your day. It's not like you're in your cubicle, you start work at 8, you take your lunch break, you go home at 5, and then do all your media stuff. So I totally agree with you. It's not fully good and it's not fully bad. And that's why it's like up to us to figure out the methods of directing it, if we can direct it. And that being said, we have a sort of an issue with our Navigators or Promise program where they're using texting. It's called what's the name of the program? It's something. But anyway, it sends a text to the students, and then they're supposed to respond back. The students aren't responding back. So it's actually in their wheelhouse. It's totally like on their phone. But again, it's like the purpose of it. Maybe they don't see it as a value to connect with their navigators. And of course, one of the main foundations of the Promise program is that they have the peer navigators who are their age and also taking classes. So just having the phone doesn't mean they're going to use it for the purposes we desire them to use it for, right? So,
belongingness reminds of purpose, right? I stress, we're trying to get, one of our goals is to have people enter the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
And, you want the communication to be positive, to be respectful, to be positive, to be useful. Some of the platforms, there's definitely a lag in expectations on the platforms on what is right and acceptable behavior. So sometimes I think some of those platforms, even though they're trying to socially connect, right, can end up being bad for them in the future. There's not an employer that I know that doesn't Google somebody, right? It doesn't look at your Facebook, it doesn't look at your Instagram, it doesn't look at. So just educating them for them to be aware that employers, and other people are going to look at their social media pages, and while it's not the sole basis of the judgment or oftentimes it's not, that certainly is an indicator of you as a person, especially if we're using that tool as an extension of ourselves, right? So just educating people to know that, when they're 18, 19, 20 years old, they're not thinking 5 years down the road. And understanding that, you're going to get looked at when you're going to get a job. So, police yourself. A lot of there are some platforms that self-police, outdoor, backpacker, some of those, the culture inside the platform self-polices. Whereas other platforms, Facebook, there's not a culture within the users to self-police.
Yes.
And it's easy to kind of go off the rails. And just having students understand that is possible. I don't know if it changes behaviors or not, but at least it informs them. I'm not sure where I was going with that.
Like social media awareness, like knowing that you're putting yourself out there. And the negativity, the one that is kind of funny, I'm not really on it. I was for a while on the HOA board, which I was actually a pretty crazy political position, but we were on, it's called Nextdoor, it's like for neighbors, and some of the stuff that people put on Nextdoor, and it's funny, I talk to people on campus and people say like, why is everyone so negative on Nextdoor, and you think like that would be a site where people wouldn't be upset because it's your neighbors, but people get really offended by something, about some, thing that someone has in their yard, and they start ranting about it on the app, and it's just kind of like, man, we're just going in the wrong direction in terms of that hostility, So.
And we lose that empathy piece too.
It's gone. Yeah, it's gone.
That part of our culture is, how do you recognize, what each person does in their occupation and what they contribute to the community in comparison to the negativity, like you were saying on the Nextdoor app. People are so quick to judge and to point out somebody else's, like what bothers them, their pet peeves.
Right.
But you go up and knock on the door and tell them that face to face.
But you don't like that. And it's like, I don't think that's necessary.
We're almost turning social media into our mental health outlet, and as we're applying for, I don't know what'll happen with the mental health grinder, but we just need more of that as a society, and obviously we're seeing more and more with some incidents we've seen on campus, situations. We clearly need more mental health interventions, and I think sometimes I agree with Larry. It's not always the culprit, but I think social media can exacerbate some of this because people get so heated and they argue, and it's the anonymity. And like you're saying, you wouldn't knock on someone's door and do that. So that perceived anonymity of social media also has that impact because people do not think empathetically about others. So it's a real problem, I think.
And I think a lot of that has to do with our shift to electronic devices, and that, you know, the prefrontal cortex for their age group from 2 to 20 something is not connected,
Right.
and it's building, and our phones are they're not getting that empathy piece or that connection with people or eye contact, because this is so much more stimulating. You know, that the research is showing that those neurons are not even building upon each other to get past that 20-something-year-old connection, right? When we talk about getting our children back past their teenage years, someone told me that I had to wait until they were in their early 20s, and I said, that's unacceptable, right? And they're like, well, we're just telling you that happens.
Yeah.
And you look at our age ranges of our students, and right, sometimes they're not really with us, even though they're sitting in our classrooms.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, I think overall electronic devices are taking over, you know, with that information overload, that it's just, there's no time or room for them to make a connection with a real human, because it's just virtual.
Right. Yeah, I mean, basic maturity, that's that. I think we'll continue to see that because our student body is continuing to get younger and younger because of the Promise Program, right? I mean, traditionally those are students just straight out of high school, and I think part of our job is to, I don't know how this will happen, if it'll be through the class or through some additional trainings, but to really do more of this, you know, social media awareness, focusing on empathy, and just basic maturity. And you're right, I mean, if kids in that age range are hardwired just to act the way they do, they don't have a lot of impulse control. We have to, obviously, we do realize that, and we just have to think about what's the best way to, again, maybe redirect them in some ways such that they get some of the skills. Because it potentially, I think, could be a problem. We talked about, too, more and more student workers on campus, which is a great thing. But then sometimes we need to have conversations about professionalism, codes of conduct, dress, blurring of lines, you know, because we will see an increase in just the number of younger people working on campus. And it's a positive, but then potential negative also is just that clarity of emphasizing on student workers that you're a student in one context and then you serve a different role, and you're expected to behave a little more professionally when you're, you know, working for the college and not in your student role. So, general maturity issues. And many of you, I think, have children. So I don't have children, so I don't relate to this. I certainly to, you know, nieces and nephews in that age where they get to thinking you're less cool as an adult, and you can't really, they don't want to hang out with you, they want to be with their friends. And then, like you're saying, when they're in their, mid to later 20s, then maybe you get them back because they've matured.
I hope so.
You hope so?
I can only hope. But in my household, I have 2 teenagers, and they're, you know, electronic devices are a big topic, you know, but I'm putting mine down. You know, I'm always guilty because I'm on my computer.
Yeah.
And so it's saying one thing and doing another. I have one child that's like, he wants all the devices gone from the room. And I have the other one that's like constantly on it, right?
Oh, that's interesting.
So the one that he's not quite there yet on the, well, he actually doesn't have a phone. So that could be the key element. But yeah, it's I hope we get it back. It's just the same thing, like we hope that people that go to school here will choose to, you know, want to live here as their homes, right? To build our community for like-minded mountains.
Yeah. And I think that's an increasing concern. You know, we continue to see the rate of second home ownership going up. So I think a lot of us worry just about, and a lot of us live off the hill, and just that sense that maybe these students will get a great education here, and then we have that, we call it the brain drain or just the people drain, because we don't have those students living locally. And again, if the cost of living continues to skyrocket and we don't have more affordable housing options, I do fear that that's going to happen, that students will say, well, I got a job, but that job's not available here, or the pay for that job is not commensurate with cost of living, which is so crazy expensive. And that we're hearing more and more of that to connect to the food, housing, and security, is that students are saying even the dorm option we have it's not really a great option for us because it's still too expensive given our wages and so forth and our expenses. So that's like a real concern for, I think, the South Shore.
Implications for de-education. I'm just starting to get some distance education courses going, and I think even in the classroom, at the start of the class, depending on what we're doing, I think just setting the expectations right at the start, and then holding the expectations, right. That's probably one of the biggest things. Once you set the cultural norm inside the class or inside, whether be on campus or face to face, being able to hold to that. Of course, allowing for exceptions. Just not saying never. But being able to set norms and standards for that, and then holding everyone in the class accountable for that. That goes a long way, right? I think that goes outside the classroom as well. Setting cultural norms. Like I've had students, talk to me with their earbuds in, and I'm like, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you pull your earbuds out? I haven't had any pushback or anything like that. I think it's just setting those norms and expectations. Part of that is generational code shifting, right? I'm kind of on the cusp of I'm a tweener. I'm in between a baby boomer and whatever's next, right? Gen Xers. And I do spend time in some of my classes, talking about the different generations and expectations of communication that, a baby boomer or a Gen Xer, all the way to, millennial, all through that. There's different expectations, and as we're moving up through the workforce, like understanding kind of how to kind of code shift up and then code shift back down is a skill, I think, a lot of this new gen what do they call it? It's not Z. The newest generation.
Is it Z or?
Yeah, I think it's Gen Z.
I thought it was Z.
Yeah, Z is a new one.
Generation Z doesn't know how, even Gen Xers going to talk. Much less talk to somebody with baby boomers, right? Most of the just understanding that and being able to set that expectation as well. We're trying to train and educate people to go out and be a good citizen in the workforce, and knowing that there's a difference in the generations and our expectations and how we speak to each other, how we listen to each other is different. And yes, it's incumbent upon somebody like me, a boomer, a tweener, right, to be able to receive information from a Generation Z and translate that. It's also incumbent on them to understand that, I'm receiving information differently as well, and I have different expectations. And that's not a bad thing. It's not. That is absolutely 100% not a personal value judgment. It's a fact, right? So it's a thing that is. I'm not judging you as less of a person because you're doing this or doing that, right? But we also have to understand that runs both ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how we get that across to our students, a great example would be the student workers, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of older adults, that are working for the college and coming to college. How do we, the 18-year-old kid, Gen Zer, right, is not, how do they respectfully talk to someone who's older?
Mm-hmm.
Do that code switching between their peers, which is perfectly fine and acceptable, right? And now they're talking to someone who's 40 years older than them at the desk.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's incumbent upon us to educate everyone on that process.
Mm-hmm. Really great points. I think it's really connects to what's happening with our Promise program, and I've seen lately and Julie and Christy and I have had some conversations about it, just almost like issues with authority, or if we talk to them about, work-life balance sometimes, or say something about social media, we sound preachy, right? Because the age difference is more extreme. And as you're talking about that generational code switching, the challenge I think is that part getting them, we can kind of relate to their levels. Larry's getting it with social media. There are some positive aspects of using it. That's how they communicate. But then they have to code switch back to us, and then at least respect the authority. So if any of you have any ideas for that in the future, and I would almost think like maybe in a wilderness education context, you maybe could demand a little more authority or like EMT, anything that involves like safety components. When I used to work in the theme park industry, it was very easy for us to sort of immediately engage an employee who was acting unfairly or acting unsafely and just say, look, if you do this again, you're going to kill someone because people could die. And so if you have like a public safety component or something like that in your training, or like culinary, where you're using sharp knives and you're using fire and all this, but I sometimes think in a traditional class, the students don't have those stakes, and we have expectations that they'll respect the authority, but then because maybe there isn't that ability to intervene and say, this is a safety issue, you need to come into line. So I'd be curious if you have any ideas about that. Anyone, about how to engage students to respect authority a little more in traditional classes?
I think through collaboration, that when we offer them to have different roles, that we are able to tap into their comfort levels or not comfort levels of playing that role. When we have group work, that's how I see the most practice being offered, is that they now are the leader for their role. You are the new safety coordinator of this group. How do we, get through this lesson, or how do we accomplish, our group work? And then they trade, right? And then the next person is the project manager, or that they have to have some practice at being a role model. Otherwise, I don't think that they get it. There's always that distinction between authoritarian and being the follower.
Yeah.
So unless they have a practice ability to be able to fulfill that role, I don't know that they're going to get that. There's just going to be those thick lines.
Yeah. So to put that into practice, and they actually would model that. And I think a lot of our fields, and maybe it's more CTE fields where there's that expectation, like there is a safety component. There's something where you rely on, but although if you go into psychology, there's a component there. If you're a therapist, you have a huge responsibility, and so maybe that's the piece I see missing a little bit with some of our students today. It's just that respect for authority and sort of valuing some of these things we're talking about. Shifting their sensibility about how they see themselves in relationship to a college class or a college environment versus what it was like in high school. So I see that as a potential challenge, the students coming in today. I mean, math, you guys can still use you have to get math, you can't escape it. So.
Yeah, they're afraid anyway. So.
And you're the expert, right?
Yeah,
so.
No, there's no issue with that.
Yeah.
There's no authority issue.
Do you have behavior issues in your classes?
Do we have what issues?
Behavior issues? or not usually?
Not usually.
Okay.
The issue we have is kind of the opposite. It's trying to get the student to work in a group.
Engage.
Oh.
Engage, yeah. They're so afraid
Yeah.
that they think they're going to not get it right and not be able to do the right thing with their group
Mm-hmm.
that they don't want to communicate.
They just shut down. Yeah.
That's a
Interesting.
really different issue culture
Yeah.
than definitely more to study group.
Yeah.
There's no fear in more to study.
Well, if they're climbing, man, I could see physical fear.
So it's a different kind of fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Not as social.
Not as psychological.
Not
Well,
social.
it's psychological too. I mean, some
But
of
not
them-
social.
Yeah.
Sometimes you see some social fear, and oftentimes if it's not identified and they help through, get help dealing with that, they self-select out. So
Mhm.
that's why typically at the professional level, you don't see that as much.
Yep.
And even at the student level, students will, if they have a fear of public speaking, or they have a fear of getting up and facilitating, right? They'll self-select out and
Mhm.
find something else.
Right.
So it's probably not as common, but it's still there. I think again, I think going back to setting expectations, not that I'm a hard ass or anything. I think once you get to know me, you agree that I'm not a hard ass. Maybe that's my own self-actualization. Hopes, right? But holding the standard, setting the expectations. Like just simple things like students send me an email. I set the expectation that it's an email. It's going to be out there. You can email your friends and do whatever. That's fine. But if you're emailing someone inside the organization, treat it like official correspondence. Put a subject line in. Put a
Yes.
greeting in. Right. Put the body in. Put your attachment in. And then
Spell
have a
Yes.
salutation. Spell checking.
Mhm.
Don't talk to me in bullets.
Mhm.
Right. Because it's a communication,
Yeah.
right? It's a form of communication, and I find that I have very rarely had to send an email back to somebody more than twice
Mhm.
before they got the picture. Like I'm not going to answer your email because this is my expectation, right? What they do outside, that's and I tell them like this is. Think of it as me being your boss, right? You wouldn't, just wouldn't talk to your boss like
Yeah.
that, right? And it's not that I'm, being an ass about it. Excuse my language, but it's like I'm trying to set them up for success for when they do, and whether they use that or not is up to them. But at least they've seen what it's like. Same with texting, we text our students a lot because of classes, we change location, right? Or, here's where we're at, there's no email, so it's easier to text. And just, again, setting that expectation for, in the leadership class, in the fundamentals class, they have to do a portfolio, so I have them develop a LinkedIn page. Like, this is your professional page. This is what it needs to look like, right? If you have it on Facebook or Instagram, right, consider cleaning up. Because guess what? I've looked at it. I've already looked at your Facebook and Instagram, right? And if you wouldn't want, your mom or your boss looking at it,
Yeah.
right? Then I tell them a story about I taught at the Naval ROTC. The University of Idaho and Washington State University. And, I've had students lose and have to pay back a full ride scholarship because they've had someone else tag them and post pictures of them underage drinking. And it's like, you call them in, it's like, were you drinking? Nope. I'm like, You know, I'm asking the question because I know the answer. Were you drinking?
Mhm.
No. So, it's
Yeah.
um,
Is your proof.
there are consequences.
Yeah.
4 years of paying back a scholarship is a pretty hefty consequence. So again, at least informing them of that. Not that may happen. They could lose a job. How many people have lost jobs right, because of something they posted, or had someone else post? Right. So just being socially media savvy in today's world is a critical skill.
I'm actually thinking about, like, after this, I want to develop a little module in the Promise classes about this, because we talk about social media, but I think just your idea of it, awareness and being savvy is great. And then I was thinking about your whole thing about email etiquette. We had a pretty long conversation. Amber was there that day from work experience, and she's great about, like, just telling students, like, you need to talk this way, right? Like, you're going to apply for a job, you have to know the etiquette, you have to know the codes, how to talk, what to say. And we did this long thing where we said, okay, your progress reports are coming in. And I said the exact same thing. You have to have a subject line, because I will get students who just say, please fill this out for me. And it's like, no. Dear da-da-da-da, my progress report is due, right? Like a couple sentences that explain what you're asking and be professional about it. So I'm almost thinking maybe we could start to identify as a campus just some of these issues, and if we're all messaging the same things, eventually the word's going to get out, right? And I know they're hearing it from Amber when they're signing up for work experience. We're sharing that in our classes, and clearly there's something there because we're identifying that. And I think it's part of the social media world, because in social media, right, you can just type without punctuation, you don't have to capitalize anything, and you can cuss and be as unprofessional as you want. So maybe just, and I'm looking at the clock, I want to be mindful of just time because we're going to end at, so maybe another minute here, but maybe that's an idea in the future, is just to build some of this out and share it somehow on campus as resources, and we can have, it's almost like talking points, right? If we all have the same talking points, when we identify an area of concern, we can really hone in on that in our classes, and one of those could be social media awareness, another one could be mindfulness, another one could be something about communication etiquette when you're talking.
And again, it doesn't have to be like that all the time.
Yeah.
But you start the conversation that way, and then I send the progress report to you, right? As the student, and then you turn around and say, okay, if it's your policy that people can call you Scott, then
right.
you say, hey, just call me Scott, and then the conversation carries on that one.
Yep.
But at least the initial email is done at a professional level. Types of communication, right? Is it formal register, semi-formal register, is it intimate register, right? Don't go intimate on the, in a professional setting until you've become professional and
work your way down.
You've worked through it,
Yeah.
right? So again, setting expectations.
Great. Okay. Well, we're going to draw to a close. Next week will be, I think, our last one for the quarter, and the topic will be passion and emotions, and so just what role that plays in our work at the college. So, the students. So, yeah, and our students, their passions and their